Welcome to There Is a Method to the Madness. My name is Rob Maxwell. I'm an exercise physiologist and personal trainer. I'm the owner of Maxwell's fitness programs, and I've been in business since 1994. The purpose of this podcast is to get to the real deal of what really works, to use the science, and most importantly, why things work and why things don't work. And sometimes I throw in a lot of sports psychology, which I'm going to do today. But man, do we need it. Before I get to that, let me thank Jonathan and Lynn Gilden of the Gilden Group at Realty Pros. They are committed to providing the highest level of customer service in home sales, and they have the reviews and the sales to back that up. So give them a shout at 386-451-2412. So let's get to today's episode. I'm going to talk about the big mountain. All right. So let me back up just for a second, because I like to do that, and just talk about very briefly the topic itself of sports psychology. You know, I can look at and compare all the different episodes, which is pretty cool. Sometimes I get very surprised. Like I get information on the downloads from Spotify, from Apple Podcasts, where people are listening. I'm always like amazed when it says there's somebody in China listening. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then I get a few in Europe, but of course, mostly United States and mostly my Central Florida area. But I can also look at what are the most listened to topics as well. And you're probably not going to be surprised to find out if I put something like diet or weight loss or something like that, or eat this, not that type of thing, then the titles explode. Like it's super, super high. Sometimes the interviews are really high as well. And I totally understand that because they're different. Not always, though, the sports psychology episodes or exercise psychology episodes, they don't always go as high. Now, I find that a little bizarre, not only because my first degree is in psychology and it's a great interest, so maybe I am a little biased that way, but just also from what I know. And what I know is that that's the biggest part. You can't motivate the unmotivatable. There is not a workout plan in the world that's going to work for somebody unless they're really ready. They have drive, they're committed, they're ready to go. There's not a diet plan in the world that's going to work for somebody who kind of relies upon half measures. They're not going to go all in. And all of that is the psychological component. And I think sometimes people look at it like, yeah. I mean, that's cool and interesting, but just tell me what to do. And a lot of times us trainers or coaches look back and go, well, we're trying to tell you that we always tell you what to do. And now we're trying to tell you why you don't do what we tell you to do. And that has a lot to do with your psychological mindset and how you can change that. So I just wanted to start out with that for those that don't necessarily always like the motivational or the sports psychology twist on things, because they really are critical. I think it's the most important thing. I mean, if you don't have the drive, if you don't have the mindset, there's absolutely nothing anybody can tell you that's going to work. And I would also say that if you do have the drive, if you really, really want to get better, whatever that is, almost anything somebody tells you to do, you're going to do, and it's going to work. So it really is everything. So now let's talk about the mountain. I heard this great analogy. It's a couple weeks ago, and something I was listening to motivational wise. And the guy was talking about, the ego and competition versus cooperation and what gets in the way. And he just told a great story. So I'm going to tell it and then give my spin on it. But basically he said, it's really, really, really healthy to want to climb the mountain. So if you're looking at the mountain and think of the mountain as your goal, but you're looking at that mountain, let's just keep it real simple right now. Your goal is to get up the mountain. And, if you've ever been around tall mountains or near rock scaling or, different types of climbing, so you can scale it or you can hike it, whatever, it's very intimidating and maybe nearly impossible for a lot of us. Like I was saying the other day, I don't think I could climb a mountain, like whether it be rock scaling. No, I'm from the Hudson Valley in New York where they do a lot of that. And I just have a feeling I would get up on that, that side of the mountain and freak, that's pretty scary. That's my guess. And, as far as like hiking up the trails and stuff, and don't get me wrong, I've done some of that, but I'm talking about really climbing a mountain. It's like, I don't think I could do either type, So, and that's fine. I'm just trying to like say, that's like really, really hard, right? But let's say that's your goal. So I'm going to climb the mountain. That's a great goal. It's challenging. It's hard. You get to the top and you can enjoy it and you can realize that you just did it. So that's like a really healthy goal. All right. But then somebody throws a twist in and they say, not only do I want to climb up the mountain, but I want to climb up the mountain faster than everybody else. And it's like, well, now all of a sudden you have really diluted that goal and you've turned that goal into competition. And that is what the majority of people do with their exercise and their sports and their training goals. And, I'm not saying extrinsic motivation is bad because that's what that is. That's extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is I want to climb the mountain because I want to prove to myself that I can do it. Now, just because I don't think I can climb a real mountain, I've climbed many mountains. I mean, in 1991 or 92, when I did my first bodybuilding show, that was a mountain. Like that was terrifying to me. And I just wanted to hold my own. That's all I wanted to do. So that was a pretty intrinsic goal. I'm not saying completely because I think it's hard to separate sometimes, but it was mostly intrinsic. And I remember doing my first marathon that I've done, and I've done 5. That was definitely climb the mountain. It was, I just want to finish this thing. My friends were saying, you've done some longer triathlons and all this, but a marathon is even more brutal. It hurts. I'm going, yeah, that's, probably true. And it was true. Like I've done a half marathon up to that point or two, half Ironman. And even though it took longer to do the half Ironman than it did to do the marathon was harder because it's just one thing you're doing for 26.2 miles. And my attention span was going, my legs were cramping, like that was a mountain. And I remember feeling completely fulfilled when I finished it. But then I ruined it, I think, like a lot of us do, because then after that, it wasn't just about climbing the mountain. Now I wanted to climb the mountain better. And the way I do it better, I mean, you could say time's intrinsic, and I suppose it is in a way, but it was also, I want to do better because other people do better. So now I just took like the enjoyment out of it. And I also took the control out of it because we can't control how fast other people climb mountains. We can only control ourselves. So now it becomes a kind of an unhealthy, egocentric goal. All right. And so many people do it. I mean, it's a constant like, I want to do this better than this. And man, do you see it come out when you put on events or you go to events? And don't get me wrong. I mean, gosh, I'm yelling at myself here because I can let that really get the best of me. That's why I'm very careful about arenas that I might compete in as far as like what I choose to do. Because if I think, this isn't going to be overly healthy for me because I'm going to get too wrapped up in what other people are doing and how I think I'm doing compared to them, and I might get caught up in that, then I don't want to do it. Because then I think, no, it's not going to be good for me. Now if I can do it and not do it, then it's great. But I have to check that because the most important thing to me is making sure that I'm always exercising and training for my own personal health and fitness. And I think sometimes we forget all that, right? I mean, I think sometimes we get caught up in these things and we forget about it. Like, yesterday, it just so happened I had my yearly physical, and I had already seen my blood work and all that, because I do the My Chart thing from Florida Healthcare, and I'd already seen that everything was good, and I already saw that my cholesterol, which was already good, was like even better. And I'm not bragging at all. I'm making a point about like what's most important to me. My father died when he was 63 from diabetes, and he was overweight, and he had type 2 diabetes, which is adult onset diabetes. And, that a lot of that was on him, God rest his soul, so to say, right? I mean, a lot of that was on him. He allowed himself to carry more body fat than he needed to, and he didn't eat a great diet, and he didn't exercise. And look, I'm not sitting up here judging. Basically, what I'm saying is a large reason why I do what I do is because I saw that and I wanted to control the controllables as I got older and more mature, and the controllables are what I can do. So like lab works and stuff is always important to me. So when my doctor comes in, and he's this short little nice guy, and he's funny, I like him. And he looks at me and he goes, all right, so like how on earth did you drop that LDL so freaking low when it was already low? Like what did you do? What's the secret? And I just kind of laughed. I said, I don't think I did much of anything that different. I decided I wanted to drop a few pounds just for running. And when I mean a few, I literally mean a few. And, I think I might have cut out, I don't know, honestly, like I eat really healthy, but, I think I might have cut out maybe some crap, but honestly, I didn't know too much what to tell him except, well, I do this and I'm very concerned. I want to pay attention to these things. And so my point is that's an intrinsic goal to me. Like that's what's most important to me. I want to be healthy. I want to be fit. I want to do what I can enjoy doing. I mean, one of my role models and heroes is Reed Hughes, who has passed on. He's an environmentalist locally, a businessman, a very successful multimillionaire. He did a lot of things right. But the thing I respected the most, and there are many things, is the fact he was doing what he wanted to do into his 90s, and that was running. Like that man had the record, or has the record, for most consecutive Easter Beach runs run. I think it was like 50. Like that's the testament right there. I mean, you can go out and get your huge ego up and go crush a triathlon or a 5K or something and like really think you're the shit because you get a plaque, a trophy or something. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I always enjoy it. What I'm saying is if that becomes your reason for doing it, you might be a little off base. You might just be a little bit off on that one because you're comparing yourself to other people, and you will never have control over what your competition does. So that's not really climbing the mountain. That's like worrying about where you are on the mountain. So let's say you're trying to climb the mountain as fast as you can, and so's your competitor, and you both get to the top, but he got there faster. Does that mean you're a loser? I mean, no. Or what if it's the other way around? What if you're both climbing the mountain and neither one of you got there, but you got further than he or she? So are you the winner? Well, not really, because you didn't end up climbing the mountain. So like we can really get wrapped up in that, and I did see a lot of that with the MaxFit games that I put on this past weekend. I mean, it's always an issue. So it's like, it's not like it was this time and these people did this. No, it's more like human nature. It's to the point where I always have to pull people aside, the judges that I have and the people that are helping me run it. I always have to pull them aside and say, okay, so, this person's here and they're going to worry about what this person's doing. And, oh, you got to watch this person because they're going to start to do this, which isn't the end of the world. But when they start to do this, this person's going to be kicking back, making comments about how people aren't holding them accountable to what they should be doing. And I mean,
stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, quick question for you. Are you someone who wants to be fit, healthy, and happy? And what if I told you you could get your dream body by simply just listening to a podcast? I'm Josh.
And I'm KG, and we're the hosts of the Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast.
Listen, we get it. Fitness isn't easy. Carbs, no carbs.
Just stop, okay? It doesn't have to be that complicated. And that's why we made this podcast. We get straight to the facts so you can become your best you.
So the way to check us out is click the link in the show notes or search Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast on any of the major podcast platforms. We'll see you soon.
I'm not exaggerating when I say this happens all the time. You know, somebody will come up and whisper behind me, so-and-so's not locking out their elbows on push-ups, and so-and-so's not going all the way down on pull-ups, and so-and-so's not stepping all the way up on the step-ups, and so-and-so's got their hands clinging to the wall holding on, you know, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, like we can only control so many things. I mean, you know, it's for fun. And of course, don't get me wrong, people. It's funny when people try to explain to me about competition. I'm like, you don't understand that competitive streak I can have. Like, I 100% get it that when you're in the throes of competition, you want it to be fair. And of course you want it to be fair, right? And you want to compete and all that. But do we really need to lose the message of what we're doing? I mean, and is it any coincidence like that both winners really, but I think one really stands out as being so humble in their winnings, and it's like not really too concerned about what anybody else is doing. I mean, does it make it less if you did your push-ups or something like perfectly because you know to, and somebody didn't do them as good? Like, are you now lesser than because they didn't? I mean, or, you know, are they, in your mind, they cheated, or the judge wasn't a perfect judge? And let me tell you, it is hard being a judge. I mean, any of them will be like, you know what, I would much rather compete because I've told this person to step on the step up like 5 times. 5 times they would. And it gets awkward. I mean, what are you supposed to do during a charity event? You know, say, stop. Okay, you're off. You're disqualified. I mean, what do you want to say? And then some people aren't like that. Some people, you like stand all the way up. They're like, they would rather be like known to like be a good sport and do it than to win. You know, I mean, it's kind of embarrassing, right? If you really try to cheat, which I don't think people do. I just don't think they think clearly on that. But, you know, to give somebody credit, you know, they said it, and I thought, you know, that takes guts to admit that. And I think they got to the root of what it's really about. And I was telling them because, you know, they get injured a lot and they're ranting a little bit. And I said, you know, maybe it's this attitude, which is why you're going to see the orthopedic again this week, because you're hurt all the time. Like, maybe if you weren't so competitive with other people, that is, like thinking you got a bad shake or whatever, you wouldn't be in the situation you're in with injuries. Because I think so many people are competing so hard all the time that they wear their bodies out, that they injure themselves, when really they should just be trying to get better, right? But I give this person credit. You know, they said back to me, they said, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. I thought, okay, well, good. And then they said, I think I'm just making up for when I was a little kid. I wasn't very athletic and I wasn't very good at things. I said, there you go. And you know what? It took a lot of humility to say that. And at the same time, it showed that they really got it. And you know what? I really think there's so much gold in that statement. That's it right there. When I see adults act this way at triathlons, at 5Ks, at max fit events, CrossFit events, crew, you name it, I'm saying adults, right? Then there was something missing way back when, and they're trying to fill the void now. I mean, we see it all the time, because a lot of people who kind of got like their competition stuff out of themselves early on, like they raced in college or things, they often don't do that as much. It's kind of the been there, done that thing. Like they feel good about themselves to know that, like, even if they were cheated by accident, because judges aren't perfect either, that it doesn't take anything away from them. It doesn't make them lesser than because somebody beat them. And I just think, like, if we really could just learn that our ultimate objective is climbing that mountain, and we're not going to be lesser than. If we all got to the top, but we were last, we're not lesser than. Like, we're just not. we hit the goal. And it's kind of like IQ tests. Like, I don't think people understand how IQ tests are done. So like, they're based on who you took them with, like what cohort you took them with. So for example, if, it was funny because in college, I took a testing and measurement course in my psychology course, and there's only 25 of us in there. And the teacher, it was like day 2, like day 1 was introductions and all that good stuff. And day 2, we sit down and he goes, I'm going to give an IQ test. And I'm going, and everybody else is like, oh man, because you really want to be evaluated. I mean, you really want to find out, that kind of thing. So we took it, and he scored them like pretty quick. Because like I said, there's only 25 of us, and he scored them and he gave it back. And it was like the difference between everybody in the room, of this room, just this room, that's the point I'm trying to make, was like a score of 2. So the very top score was a lot of genius category, because that's how they do it, the very top. And then the very worst score, and it might have been tied, was considered below average or whatever. And then everybody else kind of fell in where they were. So we're all looking at it, most of us, me included, going, so I'm just like really above intelligent, like I'm not a genius, blah, blah, blah. We all thought we're geniuses because like this was a hard class. This was an elective class that was a tough course to get into with a lot of prerequisites. It just, wasn't your basic course. And we all thought we were, Johnny and Jane Smarty Pants. So, and then the professor goes, that's my point. All of you guys are probably of pretty equal intelligence because you're all at the same college. You're all in the same major. You all took the same class, which requires 2 different prereqs to get into. So you all are pretty much the same. And I'm not surprised at all that your scores were all pretty much the same, which were average amongst each other. And then he went on to explain that that's how IQ tests are done. So his point was like how basically invalid they are, because you could take it with people who basically don't speak the same language or in a different part of the country and score this great score and think you're a genius, when in reality, they didn't understand some of the questions. All right. And like one of them, for example, don't worry, I'm going to tie this back in while I'm going on a rant on IQ tests. But one of them, for example, was there was a spigot coming out of a tree. And one of the questions is, what kind of tree is this? And like, it depends on where you lived. And a lot of people would say, this wasn't on this particular test we took, by the way. This was just an example he gave. But a lot of people might say, oh, this is a pine tree because tar's coming out of that. But if you lived in another part of the country, you might say it's a maple tree, right? And maple's coming out of that. Both make sense, right? Well, there's only one answer, and it just depends on where you lived. And it depends on what the question was looking for and how you're going to answer it. So does that make you dumb because you got it wrong? No, it makes you that the fact that you live in a different part of the country. So the point is, like, how you're evaluated doesn't change who you are or what you are. And the important thing is that you make goals that only you have 100% control over. And that is, are you going to accomplish something? Maybe you want to accomplish something faster than you have before. That's great. But don't make them how you compare to other people. Like, that's fine. And we do it because we know people like to compete. I mean, it's great. So if it's out there, give your absolute best. No question about it. But also be a good sport and understand the important thing is that everybody gets there together. And one last thing on sports psychology, like one of the things we talked about a lot, like with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you're trying to like get to higher levels. It's like, as human beings evolve, all right, not to get too, out there in the clouds here, but as human beings evolve, we tend to compete less and cooperate more. And, that's, I think, something to really think about. Cooperate. How do we cooperate together so everybody gets to the old promised land, right? Instead of trying to keep somebody out, right? So think about that. And I hope you enjoyed it. I like talking about it. And now let me talk about our great sponsors, Overhead Door of Daytona Beach, the premier garage door company of Volusia County. And we have the owners here, Jeff and Zach Hawk. Also, the main sponsor, $1,000 sponsor of the MaxFit Games. Really appreciate them, and I would appreciate that if you need any garage door help, you give them a shout at overheaddordaytona.com.